Before the release of this remake, rumors of an RE4 remake sparked a debate among fans of the original title. While some argued that this game didn't need a remake, I held the opinion that while the original was still playable, certain aspects could benefit from some modifications. With the release of this remake, Capcom did make some improvements, but there were still areas that could have been enhanced further. Moving on to graphics, I must say that the game looks absolutely stunning and is a vast improvement over the original game in every way. This is exactly what I would expect from a gaming company when they remake an 18-year-old game. The level of detail, lighting effect and character animations are simply delicious, and it's clear that Capcom put a lot of effort into making the game look as good as possible. Overall, the graphics are a major highlight of the game. Music, sound effects and voice acting, I must say that they were mostly great. The boss battles, special encounters, the overall atmosphere of the game was just perfect. The voice acting in particular was excellent, with the exception of Ada's voice. I'm not sure if it was her voice actor or just the material she was given, but her character's voice sounded uninterested and bored, as if the character didn't want to be there, especially when compared to the original RE4 Ada. To me, it felt like the voice actor was just reading her lines robotically and not acting them out. I blame Capcom for allowing her voice acting to go through without any revisions. The director should have had her redo it to better match the character's personality and emotions. The Resident Evil 4 remake has introduced a lot of gameplay changes, one of which is the character movement, which in my opinion is way more refined than the original. Unlike the original, Leon can now move, aim and shoot with smoother movement, which is what you'd expect from a remake. While some fans argued that the original's movement was fine, as someone who has played it recently, I find it to be janky and not smooth at all. It's definitely outdated, especially for a AAA game. However, the new movement in this remake is not perfect either, not even close. There are still some areas that could use some refinement, but overall it's a vast improvement over the original. However, there are some issues with the gameplay in Resident Evil 4 Remake. At times, Leon can run fine, but other times, Capcom tries to manufacture tension by having him channel his inner constipated protagonist, which can be frustrating. Aiming is also a mess in this game. When you aim down sights, the camera zooms in, making it difficult to see enemies around you. Another problem with aiming is that it seems difficult to hit anything in this game. Unlike the original, there is a weapon sway, and most weapons don't have the laser red dots, making it harder to make those precise shots you were able to make in the original game. The addition of stealth in this game doesn't make much sense, as Capcom forgot to add mechanics that would complement this addition. Although Leon can crouch, that's pretty much where the stealth ends. At its core, this game is still a looter shooter, and it would have been better if Capcom implemented true stealth mechanics. When playing on the hardest difficulties, enemies become bullet sponges, and it would have been cool to sneak around, conserving ammo by knifing them. Speaking of ammo, the game could have learned from Dead Space. In Dead Space, every enemy you vanquished dropped ammo for the weapons you had in your inventory, whereas in RE4 Remake, ammo drops are randomized, and sometimes you end up with more pesetas. Unlike Dead Space Remake, you can't buy ammo with all that money. The Dead Space mechanics makes for a less frustrating time, especially in games that don't have good melee weapon system and rely on projectile-based weapons. Hell, even Resident Evil 4 Original got the ammo drops right. In this game on the hardest difficulty, I died a lot because I kept running out of ammo. I think this is one of the things the Callisto Protocol got right. In that game, when you ran out of ammo, you had the option of using a melee-based weapon. Unlike this game, the breakable knives that are given is not effective enough. You can only use them to parry attacks, which doesn't make any sense. Parrying an axe attack with your kitchen knife is the dumbest thing I've seen in a while. To improve the stealth game, Capcom should have given Leon a machete as a default melee weapon just in case if you ran out of ammo, or make the stealth mechanics better so that you can play a whole chapter just stealth killing enemies. But even if Capcom didn't want to do any of these changes, they should have at least made it possible to purchase bullets from the merchant, which sadly is carried over from the original game. Let's discuss the puzzles in Resident Evil 4 Remake. While the game does have puzzles, they are quite easy. As I have mentioned in my previous game reviews, puzzles in modern gaming tend to be lackluster and unnecessary. However, the lab puzzles in this game were not that bad. Unfortunately, Capcom decided to remove some of the good puzzles from the original game. As I mentioned in my God of War review, game developers should consider adding the option to skip puzzles for players who don't enjoy them. There is no need to include them if they don't add to the experience, but if they are included, they should be better thought out and executed. Most Resident Evil game has you fighting bosses, and this remake is no exception. For the most part, all the bosses and boss fights from the original are still present here, except some of the fights are slightly altered, while some fights are completely changed. However, Capcom decided to cut the U3 boss fight and his section from the game, a big concern of mine whenever I hear about a game I like getting the remake treatment. Speaking about cut bosses, when a game is remade, there is always a concern that the developers might choose to cut out essential elements that made the original so well received. On the other hand, they may also introduce new content that is not well received by fans of the original. Ultimately, the reception of a remake will depend on the individual who's consuming the content. However, there are certain core aspects of the original that should not be altered or removed. While there are too many to mention, we will touch upon a few significant ones. QTEs in the original was a fucking nightmare. I get it that the original was made during a time when every game developer was obsessed with QTEs. However, the remake benefited greatly from their removal. For example, Leon's encounters with Krauser, which were one of my least favorite parts in the original, were greatly improved without them. Another questionable removal was that of the U3 boss fight and his section. Don't know why Capcom decided to cut this one. The boss was not that bad in my opinion. A modern remake doesn't feel complete if what we used to get with the base game is not sold to us as DLCs. Resident Evil 4 Remake is missing Assignment Ada and Separate Ways, which were included in the original game. Although some fans didn't like Assignment Ada, I enjoyed it. It's disappointing that we have to pay extra for what we used to get as part of the base game. But that's the trend in modern AAA gaming. The silver lining is that the base game is still enjoyable without the DLCs, and you can always wait for a sale to get them. One of the most memorable additions to the enemy types in this game is that of Garnado Desnucado, much like regular Garnados, except when you inflict significant or fatal damage to a Las Plagas host, the body mutates into a more robust, durable form of Garnado. Resident Evil 4 Remake still shares many similarities with the original, but with some changes and alterations. After the events of Resident Evil 2, Leon, battling PTSD, was recruited to the US Special Forces to receive training. In Resident Evil 4, the president's daughter was kidnapped, and Leon was assigned to locate and rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. The location where the events of Resident Evil 4 takes place is a remote little European village in Spain, which was infested with a new BOW called Las Plagas. Unlike the BOW Leon faced in Resident Evil 2, this one is far more dangerous because there are two types of parasites: the Master Las Plagas, which gives the host the ability to control the other Las Plagas parasites. Little did Leon know that he was walking into his toughest challenge yet. The game begins with Leon in a car with two local cops headed to the village to search for Ashley, when one of the cops stops to take a leak and disappears, so the other officer asks Leon to go look for him. Leon reluctantly agrees and finds a seemingly abandoned house only to be attacked by a villager inside. With his superior fighting skills, Leon parries the axe attack and round kicks the villager into the wall. Leon makes his way to the basement. Leon finds a dead officer and tries to contact the other officer, but to no avail. After fighting his way out, Leon makes his way to the village center. He must survive waves of attack until a bell rings. All the villagers drop their weapons like mindless zombies and heads towards the bell. Leon needs no introduction for fans of this franchise. Leon is one of the most beloved characters in Resident Evil series. He's one of my personal favorite characters in video game history. In this remake, however, Capcom made some changes to his character that has raised some concerns. For example, they removed many of his witty comeback lines, which makes him appear more serious. Additionally, they removed some scenes that caused story inconsistencies. For example, in the original game, Leon had a wire that he used to prevent himself from falling to his death when he was cast down a deep well. In this remake, this wire was removed. Now, Leon miraculously caught a conveniently placed chain to break his fall. While it is understandable to make changes in a remake, it is also important to ensure that these changes make sense and don't detract from the original experience. Ada is one of the playable characters from the original game, but sadly here in this remake, Capcom has decided not to give us the expansion separate ways, probably trying to sell it to us at a later date, a practice of modern day game development. I for one am not a big fan. We can't talk about Ada in this remake without mentioning her voice actress performance. To put it simply, it was terrible. And like I said earlier, it felt like she was just reading her lines instead of acting it out. But like I also said, it's Capcom's fault. They should have had her redo her lines. Lord Sadler is the leader of the cult, Los Illuminados, and is the main antagonist of both the original and this remake. He was also the host to the Master Las Plagas. However, in this game, Sadler feels more powerful. We get to see the full extent of his abilities. If he had succeeded with his plans, it would have been disastrous. Like the other characters, Sadler is more serious in this game. Unfortunately, even with all his powers, he was unable to kill Leon, not because Leon was able to resist his control, but because the plot didn't allow it. For instance, when Ashley was controlled by Lord Sadler and tried to kill Leon, Ashley fought and killed his two lackeys instead of Leon. Sadler had Leon in his grasp, but for some odd reason decided to let him go, which doesn't make any sense. The boss battle against Sadler was similar to the original game, with not much changes. The theme in this game is that the characters are less goofy than the original, and Ramona Salazar is no exception. In the original game, he looked and acted like a child, but in this game, he's portrayed in a more serious manner. Salazar is one of the bosses in the game, and his boss fight has undergone the most significant change. Unlike the original game, he's no longer attached to the wall, but is now mobile, resulting in a more engaging boss fight. This game expands on Krauser's relationship with Leon compared to the original game. As a kid, I had no idea who this guy was. All I knew was he was trying to kill Leon. In this remake, Krauser's character is explored in more detail, providing more context to their rivalry. Another improvement is the removal of QTEs, which was a significant issue with Krauser's section. The boss fight is now more enjoyable without all the distracting QTEs, which is a welcomed change in my opinion. Luis Serra is another character who benefited from this remake as he is given more screen time compared to the original game where he dies early in the castle. In certain chapters where Leon was alone in the original game, Luis now serves as your companion. Although Luis still meets his end in this remake, his death location and killer has been changed. Instead of dying in the castle by Sadler, Luis now meets his end in the mines, and he is killed by none other than Major Jack Krauser. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, Ashley Graham is the president's daughter and the main reason for Leon's presence in the remote village. She's also a controllable character in this game, but the escort mission aspect can be frustrating, especially on the hardest difficulty. The enemies are faster and harder to stagger, and ammo drops are scarce, and Ashley keeps getting grabbed. Capcom also made a senseless change to the command options, only allowing players to tell Ashley to follow closely or stay a little further away. In the original, players could ask Ashley to stay in a relatively safe place, providing more freedom to clear the way. Unfortunately, this remake is more frustrating due to Leon's lack of accuracy and the inability to tell Ashley to stay in a specific location. However, one positive change is that Ashley cannot be killed by enemies, but unlike Louise, she can still be killed by Leon. I tried triggering the cutscene where Louise shoots you if you shoot him enough times in the cabin fight, but he doesn't shoot back in this remake. In conclusion, I had some fun playing this remake, but my most enjoyable moments, or one of the reasons why I like playing these games, is the post-game rewards. I like going through a very difficult mode, right? Unlocking a specific reward and then using that reward, most of the time it's infinite ammo, using that reward to go back and replay some of those sections that gave me problems. However, I do have a complaint about how Capcom chose to assign certain rewards to specific accessories, like the cat ears granting projectile-based weapons infinite ammo. While I have no issue with the inclusion of accessories, it is disappointing that the one ability that most players desire is locked behind specific accessories. Additionally, other games have done similar things, such as EA with Dead Space Remake. Although most players may not have any problem with this at all, I find it annoying when rewards require the player to wear a pointing hand and make a pew pew bang bang sound. While most of these rewards are disappointing, some like the typewriter, rocket launcher, and the hand cannon are still worth acquiring. Unfortunately, the PRL 412 is nowhere to be found for some reason. This remake is one of the better ones out there, but I recommend playing the original game first before trying the remake. I would also love to see a Veronica X remake in the future.